Welcome back to the BrainFit Show, the show where we talk about all things brain fitness, addressing some of the myths surrounding the human brain, and also help you in your journey to build the best learning brain. My name is Jasper.
Hello, Jasper.
Everyone.
Good morning.
This is
Hi, Jasper.
Eileen.
Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Cheryl.
And this is Cheryl.
Hello.
All right. And today is a new team.
Intro, yes, new
Today is a new
team.
team, right? So a little bit more about myself. I'm actually a coach at BrainFit, and I have two lovely kids, one preschooler and one infant. And that's something that we are going to talk about a little bit more today, right? The preschool side.
And many years working in the education field,
Indeed,
Jasper.
indeed.
Yeah.
7 years. Long time. 8 years coming already. Right? And we're going to move on. Miss Eileen, maybe you share a little bit more about ourselves.
Hi, I'm Eileen. I've worked in early childhood for a long time, but before that, I'm a mother of two grown-up kids and the grandmother, Nana, to a 5-year-old. So people have always asked me, why early childhood? I think the early childhood years are very, very critical. That is where all kinds of foundations are laid. There is this book that says, right, everything I know I learned in kindergarten, play fair, be nice, and all that. And I don't think it's a far-fetched theory or belief. So I've worked with children from many countries. I've worked in Vietnam, Thailand, the United States, Australia, Malaysia. And throughout my experience, I've learned two things, right? The brain grows exponentially, and that the brain can be nurtured and trained to learn. Some cultures believe that the brain's ability to learn is finite. I have seen from my experience that that is not exactly true.
Yay.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to all the inputs that you get from Miss Eileen. All right. And about you, Cheryl. I mean, she's no stranger to us.
Yes.
Right? She's been
I've
around.
been here for a while. I'm the founder of BrainFit. I am trained as a pediatric physiotherapist and a proud mother to two girls, one in primary 4 and one in secondary 1.
Right. Yes.
So we are starting this new series where we will
this
be
new
talking
series.
about
We'll be talking a
all
little
the
bit
early
more
brain
about, we'll be talking a
development.
little bit more about how the brain actually develops, the developing brain. What does it look like from 0 to 6, and the years ahead, how does it impact us, right? And so today we're just going to touch a little bit more on what are some key areas that the brain is developing, right? Maybe some factors that may influence brain growth and early childhood importance. So to kickstart, maybe as a parent, let me share a little bit more about some of the concerns that I have, because as a parent, from the time that my girl was born, right, she was now 3 years old. And growing up, I had this anxiety, I would put it, how am I going to parent her? Like she's speaking more than she should. I'm quoting from developmental milestones per se, right? But then she's going faster. Then should I be worried that it's too fast? Is she peaking too fast? So I'm not sure. As a parent, there are some views that I may have also that may reflect all of you viewers out there also on whether your parenting is right in a sense, right?
I think it's really hard in the early years because your child, the person you're nurturing cannot give you very good feedback. Like you said, the child's just looking at you when you're trying to teach them something, right? Are they really learning? And I find it easier now. I actually think parenting gets easier. Now I have a teen, a preteen, right? And a P4, and they're able to tell me, Mommy, don't do that, right? Or, I don't think this worked for me. But for a little one, it's very little feedback. I mean, they don't have language skills, right? So that loop that's coming back to us, how are we doing as a parent? I think it's hard.
I think sometimes you just have to trust the process of that feedback loop. it's not easy, right? The child coos, the child cries. But do you realize that parents, mothers especially, can tell if it's a cry for food?
Yeah, that's true.
If it's a cry for a nappy change? Where does that come
Fun
from?
fact, I actually learned those cries also. And I
Yeah,
actually
so
know
that,
those cries.
that contrary to what you, Jasper, think that you don't know what's happening, you do. You do.
It's always very nice to talk to Miss Eileen. She's very reassuring.
My
We
myth-
are doing
my
fine.
myth got debunked.
Right? And I mean, I think the basic skill is, where do you learn that cry is for a diaper change, that cry is hunger, that cry is a need for someone to hold your daughter, for example. It's you became, I mean, with the minute you become a parent, you become very mindful of this little baby you are responsible for. And that mindfulness that you have developed is very natural and intentional.
That's
But can you imagine that if you become intentional at it, how much better you'll be?
That's very interesting, actually. So, one thing is, are we, as a parent, am I mindful of the mindfulness as of how am I taking care of my child? I think like what you said about having that natural mindfulness actually is in us, but maybe as parents we don't know it yet.
But you also mentioned, right, Jasper, earlier behind the scenes, like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, really don't know. What to do.
like when you're observing, maybe you don't know that you got to be observing for something,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's that part that makes the parenting hard as well for a new
Yes.
parent, especially in the early years.
But today, actually, we want to talk a little bit more, something more, more grounded, something that we can actually sort of measure in a sense, right? And I think that talking about the brain, that how is the brain actually developing in its in their milestones that could really help us to track how our child is growing. Maybe Cheryl, maybe you can touch a little bit more about what you know.
Yeah, I think
Since
I
you're the
think
expert.
a simple way would be looking at the milestones, right? So I think the milestones tell us what's going on. Except that if you look at the health booklet, all of us kind of check the milestones. Are they
Yeah,
baby
that's-
sitting
that's
up?
me,
Know, yeah. But there's a lot more than the 20 to 50 milestones. That's the thing, right? And you are seeing, for example, is the baby rolling, but is the baby rolling to the left and also to the right? For example, right? You have a milestone, maybe like is the baby able to use the pincer grasp to pick up something? But what about index pointing that comes before that, right? The isolation of the finger. So there are many small bits of development that really give parents very good clues, right, into what's happening in my child's development. But of course, by a certain age, I mean, at BrainFit at 4, we have developed a standardized assessment. I mean, we talked about that in the previous episode. So that's when you really can measure some of these invisible skills, like memory, for example, working memory, right, attention span, and giving a concrete number to that. But in the early years, I think a large part would be finding a very good list of milestones, even the very fine ones, that people might not talk about a lot, that really gives us some insights into what's going on, if we're talking about measurement.
I think the other thing we can talk about measurement is, I think with the BrainFit, we teach children to recognize emotions. Where does that recognition come from? It comes from very young, infancy, right? A child learns to read faces. That's why during the COVID time, when everybody was wearing a mask, it was difficult.
Difficult for
Right,
the
it was
kids.
very difficult because they couldn't learn facial expression.
Smiling, sad, all the same.
Yeah, right. So when you're talking about the less visible milestones, like Cheryl mentioned rolling and all that, at least it's more visible.
Yeah.
But where do you see where that child is emotionally? It's in the attachment, right? Does this child scramble, like when you're carrying up and almost like try to go to the back when a stranger approaches? Or does the child openly reach out and touch? Or even just that little smile, that little eye contact? Those are measurable. They are not measured on a scale, but you have heard people say, oh, your baby's very confident. Oh, your baby's very shy. And I've heard parents who say that oh, he's afraid of strangers. And all that is
Yeah.
a form of measure.
And I think, Eileen, at this point, we should talk about some of the ideas that people have about the brain. You mentioned in some cultures, some people think that you are born that way. That's who you are, and it's static. That's just the way it is. Like, my child is like that, right? Which we want to kind of say is probably not. Yes, nature has an impact, obviously, right? There is a genetic basis, even for a child who's confident, or maybe a child who's a little bit more anxious, right? I think there's a genetic basis towards that. I will say that because I have 2 girls, and one is definitely more anxious than the other one, although we have the same family environment, when raising that. But then that environmental influence, that what do you do when the baby is now crawling away, right? And up the shoulder, right? From this, highly anxious situation. That response to that child then can moderate what's the child might be predisposed to genetically, isn't it? The interplay between the genes, nature, and then nurture.
Yeah. I always use this analogy, when you drop a stone into the water, there is that ripple effect, right? Now, think of that child as that stone, literally slowly going into the water, and then you get that ripple, and you think of that ripple as the world the child is growing into, right? The immediate ripple will be parents, siblings, grandparents, and then on the outer circle will be aunties, uncles, neighbors,
The rest of the world, basically.
Yeah, and then you have the
Now you have the internet.
Yeah, and then the greater outer circle, right?
Yes,
so all this actually contributes to the child. I have a parent, very interesting. He believed that he should bring the world to his child. So from a very young age, he read to this child the newspaper.
Wow.
Literally read the newspaper. I'm not kidding you. And then he comes to me. But by the time he comes to me, Caleb is already, I think he was about 4. And he's like, Caleb's so anxious all the time. He doesn't want to go out of the house. And that's not natural, right? I mean, this goes to show how impactful
The news was
the
scary,
news and
wasn't
what we give to the children is. And finally got to speak to Caleb, and he brought me, I got him to do a drawing, and he drew some very disturbing images, right? He drew some really, and I asked his father, I said, Matthew, what have you been reading to him? And he says, I tell him about the news, the war in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I'm like,
Sorry,
why
this is
are
4
you
years
doing
old.
that? He started doing it when he was a baby, and he said, I'm teaching and training his brain. But there's training the brain and there's training the brain, right? And I don't think that training was very appropriate for the age.
The content's a bit
Yeah,
a bit
right?
skew, I guess.
But then again, let's look on the flip side. Caleb remembered everything. So there was still that processing going on.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's just that what he was processing was not terribly age appropriate.
Or fun.
Right. So then I think that, we talked about how we are, the parents bring the world to the kids nowadays, right? And so we talked about social media, the internet, and how globalization is such a
Force.
Force to the kids nowadays, right? And so I think perhaps one of the factors influencing the brain growth is the input and the feedback from the outside world that they are getting. Is it
Yes.
so impactful?
Yes. Okay, so we need to understand, right? The way to understand the brain development, the easy way to understand it is when we're born, we all have our genes that give us the brain. So we're already at different levels, right? I might be born a little bit more in tune to music, maybe, right? Sounds. So my language, I like people talking. My brain is tuned to that. Another child may not be. Right, another child
Sounds
may
like
be more
the family at home.
may be more tuned to the visuals, right? Other kids might like different things, so they're easily stimulated by things that's in the environment. So then That's the beginning, the starting point. Then you have the environment. Yeah, then so the environment comes in and now interacts with this starting point. So, if my child likes to play with blocks, for example, right? It's a kind of visual spatial child, really, enjoying that. And I imagine parents will bring a lot of blocks to the child. So if the child, say that same child doesn't really enjoy book reading, right? Parents may say, never mind, let's just go with his interests and do whatever that he or she likes, right? So which is what a very natural response. But from the brain's perspective, because the early years, so many networks and wiring is going on. So if you are now narrowing to just giving more blocks, which is not wrong, but avoiding, and saying that this is not important, he doesn't really like the books, let's keep it for a later time, then we might be missing some of these opportunities.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, there's this whole saying, right? Use it or lose it.
Yes.
And synaptic pruning is a very real thing. Let's think of synaptic pruning as spring cleaning your house. If you don't use it,
spring
you
cleaning
toss
the
it,
brain.
Right? Yeah, so it's very much. So if your child, to tag to what Cheryl just said, if your child likes to play with blocks and you just keep giving the child blocks, then the brain's going to one day decide that, you know what, oops, that listening part is not needed.
It's going to be a blockhead.
Visual part is not needed. So while you want to nurture that love for the blocks, because it does, it is the
it's
building
great,
block,
right?
Yeah.
It helps with
but
math.
you do want to make sure that the brain is also being trained for that visual skill when it reads, the auditory skill when the
all rounded.
yeah, the book is being read to him, because otherwise, what will happen is that all rounder, right? That development is not holistic.
Yeah, so
and we can't afford that.
Yeah, so I think that's important, which is why sometimes some of these general principles like follow their interests, right? It may not be the best if you understand then how the brain works. So I think understanding how the brain is actually developing becomes important. Then in the early childhood, yes, when the child is older, following the interest to choose the course in the university, yeah, that makes sense, right? But in early ages, where rapid wiring is going on in so many areas, you don't really want to skew and follow interests.
Exactly.
In fact, you want to see where they're not interested in and really scaffold those areas, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why when you talk about early childhood curriculum, why don't we have an early childhood curriculum that just teaches architecture for that block building child, or just literacy for the child who likes to read a book? Why is it that in all early childhood curriculum, if you read most early childhood website, they'll say holistic child. What does that mean? It means a child who is being developed with a balanced approach to learning. And while it's unintentional, I don't think many curriculum actually intentionally, they do it, but they don't understand sometimes why it's done. It's because the brain has to develop in all the different areas of learning, or as our BrainFit people say, the 5 pillars of learning. Right?
Yeah, but I think it's also important to point out at this point, right? So let's say my child doesn't like movement, right? So it's a sedentary child. It's all right, but not overly excited about playground activities. So we also don't want, the listeners to now think that, okay, I'm going to force my child to do this, you know, because forcing is not the right strategy.
Right.
Please don't force your child to do things.
Yes, so that's not what we're saying. We're saying that we should very gently, very mindfully scaffold them to like the activity, and you can do that. So in fact, that's the purpose of our baby program, to teach parents how to scaffold skills, so that it can become an interest, for the child. So I think these are kind of general guidelines which might be useful for parents to keep in mind.
I think that word scaffold is so important, because we think of the building the brain like building the word scaffold comes from building a building, right? And you start from the bottom and you lay the foundation. But I think we all know that if you force me to do something, the inner natural response is,
no.
Why should I do it? I'm not going to do it I agree with you, Cheryl, that it's got to come naturally, make it fun, which brings us back to this whole idea of, there is this thing that they talk about where to work with a child is a serve and return process, right? It's like tennis, the parent serves, the child returns, and if the child's not returning in the right direction, then
Don't keep serving.
then you can still serve, but in a different direction. That's why the tennis player doesn't stand at one. It's running all over. He's running all over the place. Right?
Or observe why the return is not happening, and then seeing how to facilitate.
Is he holding
that.
the racket right?
Yeah.
Right, things like that.
I mean, we talk about parenting being a really mindful process, right?
It is.
And it's a skill. I mean, not all of us. It's not easy to be mindful in this very busy world. For adults, the phone is there all the time. Messages are coming in, but I mean, what the core skills that you really, really need is understanding your child, because every brain is unique. What works for one child might not work for another. So then what does your child need in that situation, in that interaction with the blocks? What is going on? One child likes it, another one doesn't. Then what do I do in response to that situation?
Yes, I think now that the internet is so open to everybody, I think parents can also be more aware, but to be more aware to the things that actually help them be more purposeful. I think it really helps, rather than just, I'm just reading this article, I'm just reading that article, and then I'll just apply on my child because this expert says so. And I think that like what you all mentioned about being intentional, having the right play
end
that
results,
helps, yes,
right?
and make it fun for them. Not just being purposeful, like I need to train your motor brain. You are going to run every day with me, in that sense. But also to stoop down to the child's level and then have fun with them, because being a parent is not. It's already so stressful, right? Just
how many hours of sleep did you have last night?
I can count with one hand.
It's true,
right? But be fun about it, because like every time I think that when I come home, I don't want to be like just scolding my kids. All right, I want to have fun with them, right? And at the same time also be very mindful of what are the games that I play with them, what are the toys that they are receiving. Like I think what Cheryl brought up, because when my girl growing up, I saw that I was. And that was the time that I was more exposed to what BrainFit was doing. Then I think I was more intentional with the way I played with her, and I think that she's
progressing very well.
Thank
She's
you.
a lovely girl.
Lovely girl. Yes.
It's interesting you brought that up, because it brings to mind our baby program. I spoke to a parent recently who came for the tour during the baby program, and she said something that has stayed with me till now, right? She said that I was such a stressed parent because I want all these things for my child, but I didn't know how to go about it. And your baby program teacher actually, she taught us a couple of things, but through that one program, she attended a trial class. She said through that one trial class, she said it really shifted. She used the word shifted. Yeah, I really like that she used. It truly shifted the way I looked at how my child was enjoying what I was doing.
Oh, that's
She said, I just kept doing the things that I thought that my child should enjoy. And
not
and
really having that serve and return,
yeah,
right?
No serve and return. And she said to me, she said that, and the one thing I realized I had to watch my child to see if what I was so keen to teach is being learned.
Yeah, like we always say, teaching is not equals to learning, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about learning and the young baby and wiring all these wonderful networks that we want, it's very important what they are doing and how they're engaging with the task.
So we have a lot of parents who have all parents have good intentions.
Yes.
But like you said, I have all these good intentions. Where do I go with it? So I just run with it as the best I can. But when I heard from this parent, it kind of, I want to say, made me more aware that while parents have all these good intentions, they do need that
structure.
That
will help, right?
structure and also ideas, right? And that's what I feel that our teachers in the baby program have done very well. If they've actually provided ideas, you go to the store and you buy all these wonderful little manipulatives, and then let the child play with the manipulatives. But in our program, we actually teach parents how to talk to the children when they're playing with the manipulatives.
The how.
Yeah, and that how to play and what to say during play is critical. That's where your serve and return comes.
Yes, absolutely. And those are the powerful moments that you're really, making the wiring of the brain and building all the intelligences that, we want so much for our children.
Yeah, that was really good. And I never saw that perspective of the parent having that difficulty of not knowing how to play. Because I just thought that, personally, I mean, maybe because I'm early childhood trained,
so
it becomes naturally to me, right? So I expect everybody to have that, that knowledge. But when that happened, then I realized that this is where we come in.
We can help the parents, right?
Yeah, this is where we come in. We help with the how to do it.
And we curate the activities, so
properly,
that all these set are very intentional to build all the important
I think because
processes.
Parents growing up, they might not have been exposed to that kind of play in their younger days, And so
I didn't do that. Did you have that when you were growing up? None of us.
Not really, right? So then when growing up, my idea of play is this. My idea of play will be translated to my child, and that is it, right? But then, where is that focus that that I really need to help my child? My child's, my ceiling become my child's floor. Where does that come play? So I think the early childhood years really important to help with the development of the brain. So maybe some last takeaways before we close off the session, right? If you had one important tip for the parents out there watching, what would that be?
A brain tip? I think I will probably come back to, we all talk about that the early years are very important. 6 years old is a big brain milestone, so a lot of development is happening during that period. A good tip, I think, and that is how I parented my two girls, right, is I think about development around 5 main pillars. I think we talked about that in our previous episode. So that's the motor brain, visual, auditory, focus, and emotions, right? So every day I would think to myself, what have I done with Isabel, my older girl, right? Motor-wise. So has my helper brought her down to the playground if I was working and I was busy, right? Have we done something to build that? And then I think about visual, right? What kind of manipulatives have we done? And I look at the manipulative because I'm very intentional in what I want to build, right? Is it certain shapes of certain design or something, right? To challenge her visually. Then I think about auditory. Have I read her a book? Right, so that's where the language skills come in, and then focus. Focus would be, have I, are all these done in kind of a sustained, quiet activity form? Have I stretched her attention? And finally, have I spent time bonding with her? So every day I think it through a bit like a formula, of these 5 areas that I am, kind of methodically, intentionally wanting to build. Which is kind of the holistic part that you were talking about.
Yeah. So the fact that you actually have thought it out methodically, I think that's amazing. Sometimes we just muddle through the day.
No, we just do what we know.
Yeah. No. Seriously. No, I think that methodical way is good in that you get that holistic development, right? And in that intentionality, you are interacting. So there is that serve and return that's already happening, right? You're talking to the child is responding. So, parents may say, but my child is an infant. How do I do it? When a child coos, babbles, coos, you intentionally go to the child, move his or her hand and do that whole clapping thing and talk to the child. Think about what's happening when something like that happens. You are talking about responding auditorily, that visual contact, that eye contact, that movement, play with the little feet and hand, and all that is motor skill, right? And the fact that you're smiling and the child is smiling back at you, that is emotion. So even in that little action, you have already covered the 5 pillars at infancy.
Yep.
And of course, you build on that as they grow older.
And it's good to know so that I've got a good session with the child without thinking that, nothing is happening, right? But so I think the understanding and the intentionality, I think that's important. And I think Eileen's point, so we talk about the 5 pillars, but how are you executing the serve and return that we keep talking about? I think that would be an important, point for the parents.
I think for my takeaway would be the way you purposefully and intentionally play with your child, and the way you talk to your child, the way that you listen to your child, it actually becomes a mirror for them to actually reflect on what they should be doing, they should be speaking about in the future. Like, I think in the past, I think grandmothers who are grandparents who are more in the past not so educated back then, right, would then speak to them like, come, let's go gai gai, or let's go and pom pom, so I learned somewhere that, if we do teach them these words, then they will use these words, right? But
use
if you use
words.
actual English, shower, let's go and shower, let's go and eat, and then the feedback to them is that, eat means this, shower means this, all right? And it's very intentional for us to be speaking that way, even though it's in Singapore, it's very easy to just use this, to just slang it out, right? But I think when it comes to the developmental milestones of the child and being aware of how they are growing, I think that's where we have to be more aware as parents. Like, I think maybe you can agree on that.
Yeah.
I think as overall.
Absolutely.
So, thank you once again for joining us. And if you did enjoy it, come back again as we continue on the series on early childhood education. If you have any questions at all regarding the brain, just feel free to drop us a message on our website, on our socials, right? And join us as we embark on this journey to build the
Best
learning
Brain!
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.